Is your HOA always this fair when a tow truck beeps in my driveway and my coffee cools on the counter? They stamped a 3 a.m. tow order, called my work truck a chronic eyesore, and tried to tow it off my own property. Problem is, I also run a law firm. One forged signature, one fake timestamp, and our audit notice hit their bank pipeline with a cold paper stamp and city seal glare. Next week, they'd learn what that audit meant. This morning it started with one tow truck in my driveway. The first thing I heard that morning wasn't the coffee maker or the heater kicking on. It was a sharp electronic beep, the kind my front door camera makes when someone steps into its sensor range. At 6:48 a.m., that sound meant trouble. I walked to the window mug in hand, still half asleep and hoping it was just a dog walker or a package drop. But the moment I parted the blinds, any hope of a quiet morning died fast. A white flatbed tow truck was already halfway up my driveway, reverse lights glowing an icy red in the Colorado dawn. The steel bed hissed as it tilted down ready to swallow my gray Ford F-150, like it had been waiting all night to do it. The driver leaned out his open window radio pressed to his mouth. "Copy that," he said. "We're here for the gray F-150 again. That word hit harder than the cold air coming through the window frame. I set my coffee down and stepped outside. The morning was crisp, the kind of cold that sits on your shoulders. Dew clung to the grass and a soft mist drifted above the street. It would have been peaceful if not for the diesel rumble vibrating through the driveway. The tow truck kept backing up. Chains rattled, metal clanged. Right behind me, the chime from the front door rang out one bright ding. I glanced at the small screen mounted next to the door. A filing notice flashed across it. Tow order number 2, filed 03:17 a.m. Filed at 3:17 in the morning. Of course it was. The driver put the truck in park, climbed out, and grabbed a clipboard. He walked over like he'd done this 1,000 times. "Morning," he said, though he didn't sound like he hoped it would be one. "We've got an active tow order for this vehicle." "That's funny," I said, "because this driveway belongs to me, and that truck hasn't moved an inch since yesterday. We don't handle the violation details," he replied. "We just respond to HOA authorizations." He held out the paper and I took it. Same boilerplate language, same stamped header. At the bottom, signature Cheryl Davenport. I handed it back. "What violation?" He flipped the clipboard around, tapped the line halfway down the page. "Chronic aesthetic nuisance. Non-compliant work vehicle." "That's not a violation," I said. "That's a phrase someone made up at 3 a.m. because they were bored and petty." The man shifted his weight clearly, wishing he was anywhere else. "Jack." I turned to see Hank, my neighbor, standing at the edge of his lawn bathrobe, tied tight steaming mug in his hand. His slippers were already soaked through. He didn't come closer, just watched, eyebrows raised. 2 houses down, I caught the flicker of blinds. Mrs. Fowler was already on her second phone call of the morning from the looks of it. I walked toward the tow truck key fob, warm in my hand. "You'll need a court order to remove that truck," I said. "HOA notes alone don't cut it." Before the driver could answer, a voice snapped across the street like a dry twig. "Step away from the vehicle, Mr. Miller." Cheryl Davenport appeared at the corner of my property line, marching up the sidewalk with all the self-appointed authority she could physically carry. Clipboard, tablet, navy blazer, the whole uniform of suburban tyranny. She didn't slow down. She didn't even greet me. She stopped beside the tow truck and jabbed a finger toward my F-150. "This eyesore violates community aesthetics," she declared. "You've been warned repeatedly. This action is final." I laughed once, short and sharp. "You already tried this 3 months ago. Tow, attempt number 1. Didn't work then either." "That tow was rescinded," she snapped, "and irrelevant." I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the camera app. The live feed from my door cam popped up, Cheryl the tow truck, the entire absurd scene framed with a red wreck light blinking in the corner. "You're being recorded," I said calmly. "I'm within my authority," she replied. "Are you?" I swiped to another folder and held up the screen. Tow, authorization number 1. Same truck, same driveway, same driver. Status, attempted tow canceled on site. The driver let out a soft groan. Man, I knew this was the same house. Cheryl's jaw twitched. Just once. But I caught it. "Your vehicle is non-compliant," she insisted. "This action is mandated by the HOA covenant." "Great," I said. "So show me the board vote. Show me the minutes. Show me literally anything that gives you authority to tow a private vehicle from a private driveway." She didn't move. The driver stepped back. Even Hank took a half-step closer, watching. Behind me, the tow truck engine sputtered, then died as the driver shut it off. Silence settled over the street, the heavy kind, the kind that lets every neighbor hear every word. I took one slow step forward, keeping my tone level. "Try to tow it again," I said, "and you'll see exactly what happens next." At my back, the tiny blue LED on my camera blinked steadily, capturing every second. Earl's Diner smelled like bacon and burnt coffee, exactly what I needed. I slid into my usual booth along the back wall, the one with the cracked red vinyl seat and a view of both the front door and the parking lot. The kind of place where the coffee never really tasted good, but somehow always felt right. I opened my laptop and set a yellow folder on the table next to it. Tow, authorization number 1. Just seeing the words on the tab raised my blood pressure. "Jack, you brought the binder." I looked up. Linda Hayes stood at the end of the booth. Blazer, slightly wrinkled hair pulled back in a quick ponytail like she'd rolled straight out of bed and into a workday. Which, knowing Linda, she probably had. She had a way of looking like she'd been awake longer than the sun. "Morning," I said. "You're early. You're the one sending me tow orders at 6 in the morning." She slid into the opposite seat. "Let's see it." I pushed the yellow folder across the table. She flipped it open, revealing tow authorization number 1 in a plastic sleeve. The paper had that faint, off-white look of something printed by someone who loved their laser printer a little too much. "Filed July 3rd, she murmured. 3:17 a.m. Someone couldn't sleep. Carol, the waitress, ambled over with a coffee pot in one hand and a menu tucked under her arm. "The usual, Jack?" she asked. "Please," I said. She turned to Linda. "You want some Honjust coffee?" Linda answered. "Black. Whatever keeps my eyes open." Carol filled both mugs, then wandered off toward the counter, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the tile. Linda pulled her glasses from her jacket pocket and leaned over the document. "All right," she said. "Let's look at the Queen's handwriting." She tapped the signature line at the bottom, Cheryl Davenport, in a neat, practiced script. Then she reached into her own bag and pulled out another sheet. "What's that?" I asked. "Homeowner notice from March," she said. "Cheryl's signature on a standard HOA letter. I dug it out last night when you sent me the first photo." She laid the 2 pages side by side. The diner's overhead light reflected off the plastic sleeves. Steam curled up from our coffee between us. "Look here," she said quietly, "this loop on the D and the angle on the P." I leaned in. On the March letter, the D in Davenport had a slight flourish at the top, a habit someone might pick up in high school and never shake. On the tow order, the D was rigid, almost mechanical. The P's were tighter, more upright. "It's close," I said. "It's close enough to fool a tow guy," Linda replied. "Not close enough to fool someone like me." "You're saying I'm saying this tow order signature was either traced auto-generated or done by someone trying very hard to copy Cheryl's style." She sat back. "That is not how she usually signs her name." I stared at the 2 pages. Outside the window, a pickup rumbled past on the highway taillights fading into the gray morning. My own truck sat quietly in my driveway across town, probably still under the watchful eye of my front camera. Clerical error, my ass, I muttered. Linda reached for her mug and took a sip. Have you talked to the county clerk yet? Not about this tow order, I said. Only about the hearing dates. Call them, she said. Put it on speaker. I pulled my phone out, opened my contacts, and tapped the number for the clerk's office. After a few rings, a bored-sounding voice answered. County Records, the man said. This is Morris. Hi, this is Jack Miller over in Oak Ridge Estates, I said. I'm calling about a filing timestamp I need to confirm. What's the document, he asked. Tow authorization issued by Oak Ridge Estates, HOA. Filed July 3rd at 3:17 a.m., according to their copy. I could hear the faint clack of a keyboard through the line. 3:17 a.m., he repeated. That's what I'm trying to verify. That's odd, he said. Our system doesn't accept HOA filings outside business hours. They can email or drop forms, but they're stamped the next day. So, 3:17 a.m. timestamp. Wouldn't have come from our side, he said. If it says that it wasn't stamped by us. Linda raised her eyebrows at me over her coffee. Thanks, I said into the phone. That's what I needed to know. No problem, Morris replied. If you need a certified copy of anything, you can request it online. I hung up and set the phone down between us. That's outside HOA filing hours, I said. Linda nodded slowly. So the timestamp is fabricated. The signature doesn't match. And they tried to roll a tow truck into your driveway based on that. The clatter of plates from the kitchen drifted over. Someone laughed 2 booths away. Carol slid a plate of eggs and bacon onto the table without breaking the mood, then politely retreated. I watched the steam rise from the food and forced myself to keep my voice level. They're sloppy, I said. And arrogant. Both are useful, Linda replied. She reached into the folder and pulled out a thick, dog-eared booklet, Oak Ridge Estates Covenants and Bylaws. Page corners were folded highlighter marks bleeding through like scars. She flipped to a section near the front, then turned the booklet so it faced me. Her finger landed on a line halfway down the page. Section 4, she read. Vehicle removal and towing authority. Her eyes traced the paragraph. Listen. She read aloud, slow and clear. Any authorization for removal or towing of a resident's vehicle must be approved by a majority vote of the board at a noticed meeting, recorded in the minutes and accompanied by written notice to the homeowner. She looked up. Did that happen? There was no vote, I said. No meeting, no notice, just a tow truck and a fake timestamp. Then Section 4 is your best friend, she said, tapping the page, because right now this entire tow process is built on forged procedure. The words settled between us heavier than the plate of food. Linda closed the bylaw booklet and slid it back toward me along with tow authorization number 1. That's your wedge. Jack, she said. They bent the rules and they left fingerprints. I ran my thumb along the edge of the folder, feeling the weight of the paper inside. So, I push on the wedge, I said. She watched me for a long second, then leaned back against the vinyl seat. Jack, she said quietly, this isn't about your truck, it's about their money. Ethan called while I was in the garage tightening a bolt on the corner of my workbench. My phone buzzed on the scarred wood between a socket wrench and a box of deck screws. I wiped my fingers on a rag and glanced at the screen. Ethan, Oak Ridge manager. I answered. Yeah, Jack, they're scheduling an emergency nuisance hearing on your truck, he blurted. Tonight, 7 p.m., clubhouse. For a second, all I heard was the ticking of the fluorescent light above my head and the faint hum of the fridge in the corner. An emergency hearing, I repeated, because my truck's sitting in my own driveway. They're calling it a chronic visual nuisance, he said. Cheryl pushed it. The board went along. I exhaled slowly, looking past the open garage door to where my F-150 sat on the concrete exactly where it had been that morning. The same truck that had already survived tow attempt number 1. "Fine," I said. "I'll be there." Jack Ethan lowered his voice. "Bring the paperwork, and the first tow order, and don't come alone in your head this time." The line clicked off. By early evening, the sky over Oak Ridge Estates had that washed-out color that made everything look cheaper than it was. I pulled up near the clubhouse, killed the engine, and grabbed my yellow folder from the passenger seat. I paused for a second, turning the key fob over in my hand. The black plastic shell was still smooth, unmarked. I set it on the passenger seat, grabbed the folder, and stepped out. A small crowd milled in front of the clubhouse, neighbors in work boots, sneakers, and tired faces. Conversations dropped to a low mutter as I walked past. Half of them had probably gotten the hearing notice on their door cameras just like I had. Near the entrance, the neighborhood bulletin board leaned under a sheet of cloudy plastic. A fresh white sheet was pinned square in the center. Truck violation hearing. 7:00 p.m. Tonight. Subject 2009 Ford F-150, 114 Pinecrest. My name wasn't on it, but it didn't have to be. Everyone knew. I let my eyes rest on the notice for a beat, then pushed the clubhouse door open. Inside, the room looked like a forgotten office break room. Beige walls, low ceiling tiles, rows of plastic chairs arranged in crooked lines. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and dust, like nobody thought to open a window. At the front, a folding table faced the room. Behind it sat Cheryl and the 3 board members, Wallace with his ever-present clipboard, Linda G., with her tight smile, and Peter, who always looked like he'd taken a test he didn't study for. A portable projector sat off to the side on a cart, its tiny fan whining as it ran a test pattern on the blank white screen behind them. Ethan stood against the far wall near the light switch, a thin manila envelope tucked under his arm. "Mr. Miller," Cheryl said, spotting me. "Please find a seat. We'd like to start on time." I walked down the center aisle, chose a chair near the back, and set the folder on my lap. Behind me, the door eased shut with a soft click. The murmur of conversation died down. Cheryl tapped a small gavel against the table. "This emergency hearing is called to order," she announced. "Tonight we will address ongoing violations related to the vehicle parked at 114 Pinecrest Drive." Wallace dimmed the lights halfway. The projector flickered, then threw a harsh rectangle of light onto the screen. An image snapped into place. My truck, framed from the street, captured on some zoom lens as if it were a suspect. "As you can see," Cheryl said, "this vehicle has become a persistent aesthetic blight. We have multiple photographs documenting its impact on the neighborhood." The slide changed. Another angle. Street-side driveway, close-up of the tailgate. I recognized some of the shots from my own cameras and felt my jaw tighten. A few residents glanced from the screen to me, measuring the man against the accusation. When Cheryl paused to click over to the next file, I spoke. "Show me the board vote authorizing tow number 2, I said. The words cut through the room. Chairs creaked. Someone cleared their throat. Even the projector fan seemed louder for a heartbeat. Cheryl blinked once. "This hearing is about your ongoing violation, Mr. Miller, not—" "It's about both," I interrupted. "Your bylaw requires a board vote at a noticed meeting with minutes before you can authorize any tow. So show me the vote that approved the tow order from this morning." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Every ear in the room was already tuned in. Wallace shifted in his seat. Linda G. busied herself with a stack of papers that didn't need straightening. Peter stared at the table like the answers might be written in the wood grain. Operational details of enforcement actions are not subject to Resident Section 4, I said. Vehicle removal and towing authority. I opened my folder, slid out a printed copy of the bylaws with the relevant paragraph highlighted in yellow. I held it up so all 4 board members could see the block of text they were pretending not to remember. Board vote. Recorded minutes. Written notice. I tilted my head. Did that happen? No one answered. A cough from the back row sounded too loud. Someone shifted their feet. Ethan peeled himself off the wall and moved toward my row, keeping his eyes on the carpet. He stopped just behind my chair. "Jack," he whispered low enough that only I could hear. "Here." He pressed the manila envelope into my hand and then retreated, sliding along the wall like he was trying to merge into it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stapled packet, printed agendas, attendance lists, and on top a page stamped in red. Missing minutes. July. My thumb rested on that stamp for a second. Missing, but not gone. I stood up and walked slowly toward the front, and the packet in one hand, the folder in the other. When I was a few rows back, I stopped. "Wallace," I said, "could you put something on the projector for me?" He looked at Cheryl. She didn't say no, and that was enough. He took the packet with reluctant fingers and fed the top page into the projector's document camera. The machine made a soft mechanical sound. The image on the screen changed. Tow authorization number 2 filled the projection. Same boilerplate, same language, file date. At the bottom in neat script, Cheryl Davenport. Murmurs rippled across the room. "Now," I said, opening my folder again, "let's compare." I pulled out a blown-up copy of Tow authorization number 1. The one from 3 months ago, with Cheryl's original signature enlarged to nearly the width of the page. I stepped closer to the screen and held it beside the projected signature. 2 names. 2 versions of the same woman's handwriting. Close enough to fool a sleepy tow driver, not close enough to survive a second look. "This," I said, nodding toward the projection, "is what your 3:17 a.m. miracle signature looks like." I tapped the paper in my hand. "And this is what Cheryl actually signs like." A low wave of reaction moved through the room. Someone in the second row whispered, "Those don't match." Another let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Wallace swallowed hard. Adam's apple bobbing. Peter's fingers started drumming faster. Even Linda G. looked up now, eyes flicking between the 2 signatures. Cheryl's face tightened around the eyes. "You are mischaracterizing internal documents, Mr. Miller," she said. "This is inappropriate for—" "No," I said. "What's inappropriate is forging procedure and then sending a tow truck to my driveway." I let the sentence hang there. No one rushed to fill the silence. I lowered the pages and met Cheryl's gaze. "If you keep pushing this, Cheryl," I said quietly, "we'll take it to the bank." The projector hummed on, washing the wall in bright light, pinning both signatures up there like they'd finally run out of places to hide. Linda dropped the file on my desk hard enough to make my stapler jump. The cover sheet was printed in bold block letters, HOA, banking structure. H, routing. Lockbox merchant fees. "Thought we were just talking about a tow truck," I said. "We were," she replied, sliding into the chair across from me. "Now we're talking about a pipeline." My office at Miller and Hayes Law wasn't big, but it was clean. White walls, 1 framed map of Cedar Falls, 1 sagging bookcase of case reporters, and a window that looked down on Main Street. The kind of room nobody would make a TV show about. The kind of room where trouble got sorted out quietly. I picked up the file. It was heavy with paper and the faint smell of toner. "Where'd you pull this from?" I asked. "Public records vendor disclosures. A very bored bank contact," she said. "You rattled the board last night. That means they're sloppy this morning. I wanted to see who was actually touching the money. I flipped the folder open. The first page was a diagram, simple boxes connected by arrows. Resident dues. Lockbox PO. Box. Processing center. H. Vendor. HOA account. So, that's the flow, Linda said. Checks, automatic withdrawals, online payments, everything goes through this pipeline. I studied the lines. Looks straightforward. She smiled without humor. On paper. She reached over, plucked the diagram away, and exposed the next layer rows of printed statements, spreadsheets, transaction reports. Highlighted entries glowed yellow under my office light. Look here, she said, pointing to a column of charges. Dues batches hitting the lockbox. Then again, here similar amounts, same dates under a processing fee code. I leaned closer. The numbers were close enough to be twins. Same days, slightly different descriptions. Double billing, I asked. Or, very enthusiastic, fees, Linda said. And this name. She tapped the top of the page. Ridgeview Processing Services. Never heard of them, I said. Neither have I, she replied, and I've sued half the vendors in the county. They don't show up in the usual lists. No office address, just a mailing box and a routing relationship. A ghost vendor, I said. Pretty much, she agreed. I set the diagram down, then pulled my chair in closer. My key fob sat on the corner of the desk right where I'd dropped it when I came in. As I shifted the stack of papers toward me, the edge of a folder nudged it. The fob slid at the metal drawer handle and bounced. I caught it before it hit the floor, but not before a sharp edge nicked the plastic. Damn, I muttered, turning it over. A hairline scratch cut across the shiny black surface, breaking the reflection. Add it to the list of things they've banged up, Linda said. Now, focus. She pulled a legal pad toward herself and wrote 3 words in big letters. TOU, breach, pipeline. Your truck was the opening move, she said, underlining tow, but it's not the real violation. It's just the part they were arrogant enough to put in your driveway where a camera could see it. I watched the tip of her pen move. Here, she tapped, breach is where they forged procedure. Fake timestamp. Fake or manipulated signature. No board vote, no minutes. That gets you in the door. She slid the highlighted bank statements on top of the pad. And here she tapped, pipeline is where the real damage is. Duplicate charges, shadow vendor fees, nobody approved. That's not just harassment. That's potential fraud. The clock on the wall ticked softly above us. Outside, a bus wheezed past, brakes squealing. My office felt smaller, the air heavier. City Hall's not going to care about my bruised feelings over a tow, I said. They'll care if the HOA is laundering dues. Exactly, Linda said. So we stop talking about a truck they don't like and start talking about money they can't explain. She reached into the file again and pulled out a printed form, slid it across the desk toward me. The title line was in all caps, Notice of Intent. HOA, Financial Audit Request. Prepared this last night, she said. Details, your tow order attaches the forged timestamp sites. Section 4 on towing procedure and requests a formal audit of all dues routed through Ridgeview Processing for the last 24 months. I scanned the document. It was precise, tight, no fluff. Just facts, citations, and a clear request for the city attorney's office to take a hard look at where Oak Ridge residents' money was going. Who else sees this? I asked. City attorney, she said. Potentially the state's Consumer Protection Unit, if they like what they see, and any judge who ever has to weigh in on how your HOA has been operating. I picked up my pen, turning it between my fingers. You sure we're not pulling the pin on something bigger than a neighborhood squabble? I asked. Linda shrugged. They sent a tow truck to your driveway twice on bogus paperwork. They forged process to make it happen. If we're right about Ridgeview, they've been treating the dues pipeline like an ATM with no security camera pointed at it. She leaned forward. You don't owe them your silence, Jack. You owe your neighbors the truth. Before I could answer, there was a knock on the doorframe. Thomas, our paralegal, stood there with a tablet in one hand and a stack of envelopes in the other. Sorry to interrupt, he said. You wanted me to check on that hearing request? Yeah, Linda said. City Attorney's office. Any response? Thomas glanced down at his screen. They opened the file this morning, he said, and here. He scrolled, then looked back up, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. They accepted the hearing request. You're on the docket for Tuesday. A tight, quiet current ran through my chest. It wasn't relief, not yet. More like the feeling right before a starter pistol goes off. Thanks, Thomas, Linda said. He nodded and backed out, closing the door with a soft click behind him. I looked back down at the notice of intent. The line for my signature was still empty, waiting. You sign that, Linda said, and we're not just complaining about harassment anymore. We're alleging mishandling of HOA funds in a formal proceeding. I uncapped the pen. Your truck is the trigger, she said almost to herself. But the real breach is in the dues pipeline. I pressed the pen to paper and signed my name. Jack Miller. The ink bled slightly into the fibers, permanent and unforgiving. Linda gathered the document, stacked it carefully on top of the banking file, and stood. We'll get this filed in the next hour, she said. Jack, if they tried to tow your truck again, we'll seize the pipeline legally. The clubhouse was already packed when I walked in, every folding chair occupied, people lining the back wall, others clustering near the door. The air felt thick, the kind of heat that came from too many bodies and too little truth. Up front, Cheryl adjusted her blazer like she was preparing for a courtroom she didn't deserve. She lifted the gavel. This meeting determines the fate of Mr. Miller's vehicle. A murmur passed through the room. Behind her, the projector cast a washed-out slide across the wall. Truck nuisance hearing, 7 Husru p.m. The hum of the machine filled the silence, a low, mechanical whine that somehow made the whole thing feel even more absurd. I walked to an empty table and set my key fob down a little too firmly. It tapped the wood with a sharp tick, another mark on a surface full of old dents and new stories. Cheryl cleared her throat. The board will now review the ongoing violation. She lifted a stapled packet, pages of fabricated accusations, none of them anchored in reality. According to their list, my truck was responsible for visual disharmony, neighborhood inconsistency, and my personal favorite, prolonged aesthetic disruption. I folded my arms. Before you go any further, I'd like the board to provide the vote record authorizing this hearing. Wallace blinked. Linda G. shuffled her papers. Peter avoided eye contact like it was a sport. There is no requirement to, Cheryl began. Section 4 says otherwise. Someone in the back let out a quiet, "Oh boy." I stepped forward. Produce the minutes. Show the vote. Cheryl stiffened. The board's internal processes are not open to residents during enforcement actions. Ethan, leaning near the back wall, caught my eye. He took a step forward and whispered just loud enough for me to hear Jack. July minutes were deleted. The words hit harder than he meant them to. Deleted meant intentional. Deleted meant fear. Deleted meant everything we'd already suspected was true. I turned to the crowd. You hear that the 1 month that would show whether this hearing was legal has vanished. Interesting timing. Cheryl slammed the packet shut. This line of questioning is irrelevant. The violation speaks for itself. I reached into my folder, pulled out the printed side-by-side signatures, and handed them to Wallace, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Let's address that violation first, I said. Tow Order 1. Tow Order 2. Same president. Two completely different signatures. Whispers. Then outright talking. Even the projector seemed to hum louder, like it understood what it was displaying. Cheryl's face reddened. This is out of context. No, I said, forgery is always perfectly in context. I walked to the front, reached for my key fob, and tapped it once on the table. Not hard, just enough to echo. A tiny crack jumped across the wood grain. The room went still. I turned to the audience. An HOA without truth is just a rumor with a letterhead. That line landed harder than I expected. A few people nodded. Someone whispered, "He's right." Cheryl pointed a trembling finger at me. "Your truck will be removed regardless." And there it was, the real Cheryl, stripped of procedure, stripped of pretense, left only with the raw belief that she could still command us into obedience. But the room didn't lean her way this time. They leaned back. I picked up my folder. "Then we're done here." I stepped back toward the aisle, eyes locked on Cheryl's. "See you at City Hall." Behind me, chairs scraped, people whispered, and the projector flicked as the screen dimmed. But none of that mattered. The ambush was over, and now the real hearing was coming. City Hall never feels friendly, but that morning it felt like a verdict waiting to happen. Hearing room 3 was full rows of wooden benches crowded with residents from Oak Ridge Estates, people from other neighborhoods, a few reporters leaning over notebooks. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. At the front, a raised dais held 3 chairs and a long table. A blue test screen glowed on the wall behind it, waiting for someone to bring it to life. Cheryl stood at the podium, clutching a stack of documents with hands that didn't seem as steady as she wanted them to be. The microphone popped once as she leaned in. "This hearing," she began, voice echoing in the room, "addresses the ongoing community damage caused by Mr. Miller's non-compliant vehicle and his interference with legitimate HOA enforcement." I sat 3 rows back, Linda on my right, Ethan on my left. My key fob lay on top of our hearing folder, freshly cleaned, the faint scratch on its surface barely visible under the lights. For the first time in days, it looked almost new again. City Attorney Janet Rhodes sat at the center of the dais, dark blazer hair pulled into a low-knot expression, carefully neutral. She had a yellow legal pad in front of her and a pen that moved quickly when she chose to write. "Ms. Davenport, Janet said you may summarize your position." Cheryl straightened her shoulders. "Our association has the authority to maintain standards," she said. "Mr. Miller's truck is a commercial eyesore that has undermined property values and created discord. Our attempts to enforce our covenants have been met with obstruction accusations and now baseless claims about our finances." Linda's lips twitched at the word baseless. She didn't smile. Lawyers rarely smile at hearings, but I could tell she wanted to. Cheryl shuffled her papers, searching for a page. "We have photographs, violation notices, and internal records to show a pattern of noncompliance and harassment toward HOA volunteers." "Thank you," Janet said, cutting off the list before it grew. "You'll have time to submit documents into the record. Mr. Miller, you requested this hearing. You'll have an opportunity to respond." Cheryl shot me a quick, sharp look. I met it and let it pass. Janet nodded toward our table. "Mr. Miller." I rose, feeling the weight of the room shift with me. A few phones tilted up. The live stream camera mounted in the corner blinked red. I picked up our folder, left the key fob on top for a second, then picked it up too without thinking and slipped it into my hand. At the podium, the microphone clicked when I adjusted it. "My name is Jack Miller," I said. "I live at 114 Pinecrest Drive." I let the simple facts land first. Then I looked at Janet, at the camera, and at the room full of people staring back. "And I own a small law firm in Cedar Falls." I continued that sues abusive HOAs for a living. A murmur rolled through the benches, surprised, then satisfied. Ethan exhaled beside Linda. Cheryl's eyes widened a fraction of an inch. My truck, I said, isn't the problem. It's the excuse. The real issue is what this association has been doing with the power it claims to have and with the money it collects. Janet's pen started moving again. 3 months ago, I went on they tried to tow my vehicle on fabricated paperwork, fake timestamp, no board vote, no minutes. When I challenged it, the documentation disappeared. That told me one thing. There was something worse they were afraid we'd find. I glanced at Linda. She reached into our folder and pulled out a thinner stack of papers, sliding it onto the podium within reach. So, we looked, I said. We followed the money. I turned slightly toward Janet. With your permission, City Attorney Rhodes, I'd like to show you ACH Pipeline 2023.pdf and the supporting statements. Go ahead, she said. The clerk connected a cable, and the blue test screen vanished. In its place, a diagram appeared, simple boxes and arrows labeled in plain black text. Resident dues, lockbox, Ridgeview, processing services, HOA operating account. This is the outgoing payments pipeline for Oak Ridge Estates, I said. Every check, every auto draft, every online payment goes through this flow. Another slide. Spreadsheet columns. Dates, amounts, codes. These, I continued, are payment batches from last year. Dues paid by homeowners. I pointed to the first column, and here I traced to the right are processing fees on the same days in nearly identical amounts coded to a vendor called Ridgeview Processing Services. I clicked to the next page. 2 invoices showed side by side with nearly mirrored totals. Same address, I said. Same routing relationship. No registered office, no website, no record of legitimate vendor approval in the HOA minutes. I looked up at the dais. We have duplicate charges funneled through a vendor that doesn't exist anywhere except in these statements. That means homeowners were paying more than they owed and they weren't told. Cheryl grabbed her mic. Those are standard service fees, she snapped. Every association. Then why is the timestamp on my tow order fabricated? I cut in. Why is your signature inconsistent? Why are the minutes from the meeting that should have approved the enforcement missing? Counsel, Janet said, turning to Linda. Do you have a specific request? Linda stood. Yes, Your Honor, she said. Voice steady. On behalf of Mr. Miller and the residents present, we move for a provisional freeze and seizure of the HOA payment pipeline pending a full forensic audit of all dues processed through Ridgeview Processing Services over the last 24 months. The room reacted in a low, rising wave. The clerk's fingers flew over the keyboard. Ethan sat up straighter. Even the camera seemed to stare harder. Janet tapped her pen against the legal pad, eyes moving between the documents projected on the wall and the stack Linda had handed her earlier in the week. You've attached the notice of intent and supporting bank records, she asked. We have, Linda said, stamped and submitted with copies to opposing party. They're mischaracterizing, Cheryl began. Janet raised a hand. Cheryl fell silent. The documentation shows irregular billing, Janet said slowly. A shadow vendor, duplicate charges, and gaps in internal procedure. Given the potential for ongoing financial harm to residents and the forgery concerns raised by Mr. Miller's tow orders, she reached for a printed order at her elbow, her pen poised above the signature line. I find that there is sufficient cause to preserve the status quo while we investigate. Effective immediately. She signed her name with 3 quick strokes. The HOA payment pipeline is seized under provisional authority. The words seemed to hang over the room like a verdict chiseled into stone. No new dues may be withdrawn, she continued. No payments routed through Ridgeview Processing Services. No transfers from the lockbox to any HOA operating account until this office completes its review. Essential services may be addressed on a separate emergency basis. Cheryl stepped back from the podium, face draining of color. "You can't shut down our money," she blurted. I met her eyes, feeling the weight of the key fob in my hand, the scratch across its surface smooth under my thumb. "My law firm just did," I said. The email hit my inbox just after sunrise, its subject line screaming louder than any HOA violation ever had. HOA operations suspended. Financial audit in progress. For a long moment, I just stared at it, letting the words settle like dust after an explosion. All enforcement paused. All dues withdrawals frozen. All internal authority transferred to City Hall until further notice. The kind of message Cheryl would have considered impossible. The kind of message the rest of us had been waiting for. By mid-morning, the neighborhood felt different. Lighter, somehow. People stood in small clusters along Oak Ridge Drive. Dads with coffee mugs. Moms with strollers. Retirees leaning on canes sharing the news with the cautious excitement of folks who'd been burned before but hoped this time was real. When I reached the community park, I saw it, the clubhouse sealed with bright yellow tape that cut across the doors like a warning sign. A laminated notice hung dead center. By order of the city, Attorney HOA, operations suspended, premises sealed for audit. The sun glinted off the plastic band stretched across the handles stamped with the city seal. For years, this building had been ground zero for Cheryl's rule, where fines were drafted, where threats were printed, where neighbors left crying after compliance reviews. Now it looked like a bankrupt kingdom. Kids swung on the playground nearby, their laughter rising over the low hum of conversations around me. People weren't whispering like they used to. They were talking openly about the audit, the freeze, and what the board might look like without someone using it as a personal fiefdom. "Jack." I turned. Ethan was making his way through the crowd, his tie crooked, his hair windblown, a thick folder tucked under one arm. "You saw it?" he asked. "Hard to miss," I said. He blew out a breath. Vendors bailed the second the freeze went public. Landscaping refused to send a crew. Pool service wants written guarantees. Even the trash company is asking who's paying their invoices now. They're finally learning what leverage looks like, I said. Ethan nodded, then reached into his pocket. "Before I forget." He pressed something into my hand, my key fob. Clean, polished, even the hairline scratch was barely more than a whisper across the plastic. "City clerk had a detailing kit," he said. "Linda figured you deserved at least one thing in this mess that came back better than it left." I turned the fob over in my palm. It felt like closure, or maybe the start of something better. Movement at the clubhouse door pulled everyone's attention. The side door opened, and Cheryl stepped out with her arms stacked full of binders and loose paperwork. Behind her, Peter and Linda G. followed, looking like people carrying a secret they didn't enjoy holding. Cheryl marched straight toward the tape, stopping short when she read the notice. "What is this supposed to mean?" she snapped. Ethan cleared his throat. "It means you can't go inside without city authorization. This is HOA property," she said sharply. "I am still president. I have work to do." "Not anymore," Peter said, voice small but steady. She whipped around. "Excuse me. The board met this morning," he said. "We voted to remove you as president, effective immediately. You don't have the authority." "We used your bylaws," Linda G. said quietly. "Simple majority. You insisted on that rule." A ripple of reaction passed through the crowd. For once, no one looked afraid of her. Cheryl's grip tightened on the stack of binders. "You all have no idea what you're doing. This community will fall apart without a binder slipped. Papers fanned out across the concrete budget drafts, violation notices, emails with red pen scribbles. A few sheets fluttered toward the grass. No one stepped forward to help. She crouched, scrambling to gather pages, fingers shaking as she shoved them back into the binder. Another stack slid from her arm, hitting the pavement with a dull slap. People watched, silent. When she finally stood again, clutching whatever paper she'd managed to salvage, her face was drawn tight, disbelief etched into every line. She turned and walked away across the lawn past the swings toward the parking lot. A single sheet drifted free and settled behind her. She didn't look back. Nobody picked it up. "Power doesn't crumble," I murmured to Ethan beside me. "It collapses under its own lies." He gave a tired half-smile. "Speaking of collapse, you need to see this." He handed me the folder. Inside was a preliminary report from the audit team, rows of numbers, highlighted charges, and one amount circled in red, a total big enough to make anyone whistle. "That's what they skimmed?" I asked. "That's just the part they've confirmed," Ethan said. "Duplicate fees, ghost vendor charges. And here," he pointed to the last line of the document, "resident account credits, refunds to begin next billing cycle." Linda joined us, hands in her coat pockets. "They can't move a penny until the audit finishes," she said. "But when refunds start, they go straight back to the homeowners, not the board." Ethan tapped the page lightly. "Jack, refunds start next month," he said. "The pipeline credit will hit everyone.